Welcome everyone to Media Associates International's webinar. Today, a reader, tomorrow, a leader. I'm Bernice and I am chair of MAI Asia. Very, very glad to be able to be here to introduce our moderator. Aaron Lee is actually the newest member of the MAI Asia Trustees Board. So he's a newbie on our board. But he volunteered for the last two times that Lit World was held in Singapore. So he's been initiated into the world of MAI. Aaron would say that he's multi-vocational. I would call him a Renaissance man, because it's not just that he's interested in many things, but he's a master and practitioner in many fields. So in his own words, he calls himself a pilgrim poet, but he's also an elder in a church. He is a regulatory and ethics lawyer for a fintech company. So wrap your mind around that. He's authored, so he's not just a reader, but he's also an author. He's authored 3 collections of poetry and edited many more. One of those titles, Lines Spark Code, is used for A-level literature studies in Singapore. In fact, let me just read you something. This is something he wrote. We are, all of us, star-crossed voyagers, escaping by degrees, eternally at sea. If you come to Singapore and you visit our National Art Gallery, on one of the walls, you should go look for this poem. So Aaron isn't just a published poet, but he's sort of a national treasure. And together with his wife in 2014, his wife is another national treasure. She's an artist, an extremely talented one. And together they founded a culture collective. It's called Laniakea Culture Collective, and they do interdisciplinary, intercultural art practice. They love to encourage people to discover and pursue God's calling to a life of creativity and joy. And I know Aaron will now help us to discover and pursue how reading has been a vital part of his, Louis's, and Hankuri's lives. So now I hand you over to Aaron Lee, who will moderate this webinar.
Hello, friends. It's such a pleasure to have you all here with us today. So good morning, good evening, or good night, wherever you might be currently. Thank you so much to MAI and all our friends there for regularly organizing this series of webinars to bless us and to help us share the awareness of the work of MAI, which is to end gospel poverty in the world. It's a real ambitious vision, but we know that with the Lord's help, He will help us to do so. Today, the webinar topic is Today a Reader, Tomorrow a Leader. And as you have rightly guessed, no doubt, the topic is about the love of reading and about good books and what good books can do to transform our lives and help us to have greater influence for the kingdom wherever we may be. And this applies to us whether we are parents or teachers, mentors, working in the marketplace. We are called to exercise leadership, and books are a great way and an essential way, we would argue, for us to grow as people and as leaders. So we have 2 wonderful panelists with us today, and what they will do is they will each in turn give a short presentation about themselves, about their love for reading and for good books, and what the Lord has called them to do currently in this particular area. And they are friends of MAI, the MAI members, and really it's such a pleasure and privilege for us to hear from them. And so they will all both speak for about 15-18 minutes each, and then we will have a time of audience interaction. And we look forward to your questions and your observations and sharing your stories as well. So I just want to say before we kick it off that during the presentations, you are most free and warmly invited to give your comments in the chat. You see in the bottom of your Zoom platform, there is a chat button. You can just feel free to make your comments there. You know, whether you're agreeing or you're not agreeing, or you find something very striking and memorable, put it in the chat so that we can all sort of learn together and interact. And then if you had some questions, which we will address at the end, near the end of the webinar, please put those questions in the Q&A function. I hope that is clear. So I think I'm going to just introduce first our first presenter, and that is Hankuri Tawus Gaya of Nigeria. He is a youth pastor and an author, and he serves currently as an area director and a strategic plan officer with the Nigeria Fellowship of Evangelical Students, NIFES, and in the IFES Movement in Nigeria. He's also a national facilitator with Langham Preaching in Nigeria, and he's accustomed to not only reading good books and the Word of God, but also handling and teaching it. So we look forward to sharing. Welcome, Hankuri, and please take the next minutes to give your presentation.
Wow, thank you, Lee, and thank you, Louis, for being around for us to share together. Want to say thank you to MAI for this unique opportunity again to share a bit of my life's journey with books, how books have influenced me, and the few things I've learned, and also how I've shared that with others. So my journey with the Bible and books. So that will be my story. How has it been? Of course, I'm a Christian, lover of God's word and books, a writer and a psalmist. I've released a few single songs. I'm a campus missionary, as you heard. I serve with NIFES. NIFES is the IFES Movement in Nigeria. And I'm part of Langham Preaching. Langham is a ministry of John Stott. And I'm a trauma facilitator and community leader, a certified mentor and coach. And I have my first degree in accounting and then moved to theology, a postgraduate degree and a master's of divinity. I'm married to Faith, my wife, a nurse, and God has blessed us graciously with 3 daughters. Me today, I read 4 to 5 books on the average in a month. We start creating them daily to read and make use of every opportunity I have to read. I also make use of the community to help me read and write. On writing, I make effort to write daily on issues that are critical to my passion in ministry and in life. So I have discipline of keeping journals, reading the Bible, studying Bible books, characters with daily notes help me keep focused on God's word. But how did I get here? Here is my journey with the Bible and books. Growing up as a child and learning to read the Bible and books. So the Bible was one of the texts that, I learned to read with. As a child, I did my primary one. That's like grade 1 or so. I'm level 3 in a community where my dad was serving as a missionary. There was no classroom. So storybooks were not even things I could cite, I could see. At teenage age, and the reading focus was when I started reading Hausa novels were quite common, so I read the Hausa romance, Hausa novels, books on leadership and kind of wisdom. As a growing up boy then, could sneak to my dad's, collection of books, sneak to pick his books, He did some level of theology to help him do mission work. So I was curious, trying to get them to read. Then at secondary school, the secondary school I attended, that was a high school, there was not even a library. But when we were graduating, I did well in my academics, so I was given gift of 3 books. And that ushered me into wall of books. In the tertiary institution, the Bible studies in NIFES movement. NIFES is the Nigeria Fellowship of Evangelical Students. Then on the 23rd of February 1999, I got a gift of a book, a writing material and a biro, and that changed the entire focus for me, both in developing a discipline for reading God's words and reading books intentionally, picking notes from them. The fellowship then have a library, a fellowship library, a mobile one. We have a library, a literature secretary who brings the books. And it was usual for me every fellowship day, I'll borrow a book. In a week, I finish reading, return it, pick another one. So I started developing that. Then still on campus, I developed this habit of reading my Bible, started from Genesis to Revelation, beginning of the year, making notes from them. Sometimes within a year I could go through, sometimes it would take me more than a year. But I read through, take notes. Then I started buying books on campus, also my own. And I started reading books with new converts, friends on campus. I became more intentional about reading the Bible and books. While in the tertiary institution, I wrote 2 books on campus on my reflection from scriptures on how to help students excel in their academics. I saw students struggling, so that moved me to be able to share my thoughts and reflections. I started a fellowship library and a bookshop for my new school in Rivers State. Rivers State in the southern Nigeria. I'm from the northeastern Nigeria. So you could say I have 2 campuses. I school in the north, and a persecution to my faith made me, I was rusticated from school. I have to go to the southern part of Nigeria as a fugitive, an escapee, to be able to begin my studies all over again. So, and books played a significant role in that phase of my life. So on getting to the new campus, no library, so I had to start, a library for that fellowship. I became more intentional after my tertiary institution about reading and promoting books in the fellowship. I wrote a book also during this period. I bought several books for myself. Books that have transformed my life over time, and we sign away our lives. In 2001, during my industrial attachment, I decided to start in a mission agency, and Biofam Noredent introduced me to books as a mentor. And one of the books that I came across where we sign away our life. This is a story of a family, who gave everything. So this book shaped my life. Then Bruchko, it's a story of a 19-year-old American, how he was captured by the Indians and his adventure in criticizing that community. That book shaped my life and a lot of things about me. And you could see several other things. Hungry for More of God, Your Mind Matters by James Todd, Think of These Things. Then Becoming Like Jesus by Billy Akani, When God Speaks. These are a few books, and I had a lot of them who have influenced my life, but I just decided to pick these ones to share. And of course, I put the scriptures there. God's word significantly shaped my life and my thought. And my community and cycle of influence. My parents are retired missionaries now, and were pastors with Church of Christ in Nations. They started me up with scriptures, and giving me responsibility in the church. That moved me to begin to read, my dad's few books to be able to understand what is it that the Christian faith is all about. And my own family, connection with my wife, and I gave her a book when we met in the church in our youth fellowship. And I saw her with books, so that, attracted me. So when I proposed marriage to her, I told her, I don't have money, but I have books. But she accepted to marry me. Eventually she accepted to marry this missionary who I've started, but the Lord he could have was books. And I have a young girl who is 11 years now, and introduced her to reading. When she started up, she was able to read. So she wrote her first little book at 5, and then next one when she was 10 years old. And her present project she did just 2 weeks ago was to, give books to orphans. And she was able to raise a few funds and bought about 24 books, and then she got a gift of 50 books. She was able to give those books to orphans. The NIFES, the Bible studies, reading in conferences, promotion of books, really challenged me to reading. Then Langham Literature in Langham Preaching, we always have gifts of books through the ministry of John Stott. Then my theological training deepened my, my Christian convictions and on the need to read. Then African Christian textbooks and tax workers, that's the, many of you would know Luca Vandi, and then Pusnam Yiri, played also a significant role in organizing trainings on writing that I was able to attend to sharpen me. And my connection with MAI has exposed me to writers, resources, and creating opportunities and platforms for me to share my story and also some of my reflections on writing. I had a writing experience, started a writing project with OASIS, and co-authored a book, make contributions, and through that has also deepened me. And I had fathers and mentors who has given me a gift of books, who have followed me over time to ensure that I invest in reading. Then I belong to an online community called Book Trovert, where books are shared, books are reviewed every week. We share new book, review books, and also a physical book club that I belong to. With my wife and my daughter, we attend that book club every month. We have a book for the month where we read. So that community have significantly influenced me. And through that, I was able to develop and also influence them. How have I promoted books and writing? I model the way. And I quite have a library of books where young people come in to get books to read. Reading books to my family. You can see in the picture there, that's my daughter and one of my other nieces who stayed with me. And we had time to read books together. Reading books with student leaders and youth. This is a group of students that, I gave a book to, that we're presently reading with them. And I've done this for years with students. And, setting up discipleship classes where we meet weekly with youth and students in my house, me and my wife, read through the Bible with them, read books with them. It was a clear thing for target for them to be able to read books. Creating time for book reading with my staff in the office and supporting them to buy books. We have targets, how many books we read in a month, the book of the month, having those things were quite helpful. It helped me to influence them. It also strengthened my own reading. Then hosting a book outreaches in areas affected by crisis, training and mentoring on writing for students and church leaders. I've hosted some master class on writing, trained students, done workshops, seminars on writing that have also helped many young people to write. Then using books as discussion guide in conferences have also helped in promoting, books, book reading within the context to which I'm in. Started a book club in my community in Bauchi State in northeastern Nigeria. Gave them books and then encouraged them to also buy more books. Then I started 3 book clubs, started in southern Kaduna, one in Kafanchan, Manchok, and Zonkua, all in southern Kaduna in northwestern Nigeria. Then Kefi Reads, a book club in Kefi in Nasarawa State. You can see this a book club where we meet here, something every, fortnightly on Saturdays to read. Then I have this also online, book club, an online community where we read the Bible, that's God's words, and also read books. In 3 months, we read 11 books, and then we read 6 Bible books. So you can see there, we're able to read in those 3 months, we read the Gospel of Matthew, Acts, Esther, Nehemiah, James, Jude, and Proverbs, ongoing now. So Family Reading Initiative initiated, a journal during my theological training that has continued to date, initiated magazines for church, and different other writing projects for my church that has helped to encourage reading. This is my girl during her book presentation to orphans. And these are images from the book outreach in Southern Kaduna that we had this year. So you can see us giving books to, students, young people, to help them start up on their journey. These are a few of the books I've written and I've continued to read. The reason why I have this understanding that I've stayed through reading is looking at scriptures. I have Daniel understood by books. Paul was a man of the book. Moses was a writer and someone who ensured that Israel read. And of course, Jesus read the scroll and also read the scriptures. So these are convictions that have helped me to stay true in my journey of reading. I hope I will get to respond to questions as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hankuri. That's wonderful sharing and wonderful photos. I just enjoyed seeing all those pictures and hearing those stories. I was, I think, especially struck by what you were sharing, that, and some of us also kind of commented on that. When you were going to propose to your wife, you said, I have no money, I'm a missionary, but I have books, and she was convinced. She was convinced, and the Bible says wisdom is worth more than silver, and really wisdom and truth, what we get from the word is so precious because of its life-transforming qualities, for us to live lives that are useful to society and useful to the Lord. So I'm just so thankful that you touched on that with your story. I also like what you said about how your 11-year-old daughter has written 2 books, and you mentioned that it was for you a natural evolution, that you were a reader first, and then you became a writer, and obviously your daughter is the same. So thank the Lord for that. Yeah. We will have some questions, and I see that one of our friends, Jeremy, has already asked a question, but we will save those questions to the end of the webinar after we have our second presentation. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Louis Katmaitan, a medical doctor and award-winning children's book author. He's also affectionately known as Tito Doc. So welcome, Tito Doc. A brief introduction that I understand you've written more than 40 books for children and as well as non-fiction titles. You serve as a resource person for nationwide workshops of the Cultural Center of the Philippines and UNICEF-Manila, and especially you have a passion to reach out and help children who are the victims of natural disasters and armed conflict. So thank you, welcome to this webinar, and please, time over to you now.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, thank you, Aaron, for the kind introduction, and thank you, MAI Asia, for the invite to share my reading journey and my writing journey with you. As a doctor who writes books for children, I am often asked to do a reading or storytelling of my own works in different venues, classrooms, malls, museums, and hospitals. We also do bibliotherapy. I have accepted it as a part of my writing life, even if I'm more of a writer than a storyteller. Perhaps people want to hear the story directly from the person who penned the book, never mind if the author's style of storytelling is not as animated as a professional storyteller's. But the teller and the writer of children's books have a common goal: to reach out to children who are considered to be the most discriminating audience of all, and to make readers out of them. We want them to get hooked into the habit of reading early on, because once the reading virus infects them, it becomes a habit. It becomes a lifestyle. As a children's book author, I'm a strong advocate of reading-related initiatives in schools, libraries, and communities. I'm part of a 3-decade 3-decade-old organization called the Philippine Board on Books for Young People, whose mandate is to promote the love for books and reading among Filipino children in an effort to make the Philippines a nation of readers. Every year, we're the lead agency in the celebration of the National Children's Book Day with a theme focused on reading promotion and love for books. Once in a school visit, a child asked me how she could possibly become an author. And I said that she should read a lot, that she should develop a reading habit. No one becomes an author if one doesn't read. And the habit of reading is a prerequisite to becoming an author. And reading is an accrued skill, meaning that it is a skill that this is a skill that increases over time. No? It cannot be developed overnight. No? In order for you to get better at it, you have to engage in reading. So you have to do it. No? We Filipinos are not yet a reading people. My countrymen would rather prioritize food, shelter, and other basic necessities than books. Books are sometimes viewed as luxuries. That's why in the past decade, there was an attempt by our Department of Education to promote the habit of reading by procuring local children's books for their Library Hub project and distribute it to all the public schools in the country. So the learners, even those living in the islands, would have access to local storybooks. Now, with the advent of internet connectivity, we now live in a global village. And in order for us to be competitive, regardless of age and status, we need to develop a culture of reading. And I think this is the best way to equip ourselves. Since technology has invaded the print medium, young people today are reading using the digital platforms. Now, we now read in our iPads, in our iPhones, and I'm fine with it because it provides another avenue for kids to get hooked to reading. Reading is reading, no? It doesn't matter if we read physical books or digital books. And children today are digital natives. No? Notice that when you give them books, by instinct, they would tend to, to flip it, no? The books, no? Then turn the pages. We have to make books appealing to these children. Otherwise, they would just turn to other media-related activities like TV watching, internet browsing, and a handful of video games, courtesy of various apps. Now, nobody in my family really writes. My mother is a teacher and my father was a businessman, but I have always loved to read. Early on, I have seen the older members of my family got engaged in the habit of reading. My father with newspapers, my mother with magazines, my grandmother with serialized Tagalog comics. I would read any piece of writing that would interest me, be it comics, magazines, newspapers, storybooks, or informational books. As a child who grew up in the 70s, there were few storybooks available for me to read. And if at all, these were mostly fairy tales and stories imported from the West. Also, there was a scarcity of public libraries in our place. During that time, there were only a handful of original Filipino storybooks penned by local authors and illustrated by local illustrators. So when I was growing up, I never had an opportunity to meet an author, a real living author. I thought then that all the authors behind the bylines are already dead. So children today are more fortunate because they get to meet their favorite authors and can even drop a line or two in their favorite author's Facebook or Twitter accounts. So I took interest in the reading fare of my grandmother, who had a daily supply of Tagalog comics, courtesy of my father, who was working in the town. Every Friday, we would have a copy of the leading Tagalog magazine as a supplement, and I would fall in love with the characters and plots in those publications. I also love the illustrations rendered by the graphic artists in our local comics. So even before I came to know my country's great literary writers like Enrique Joaquin and J.M. Gonzalez and F. Shamil Jose, I got acquainted first with the comics novelists whose illustrated weekly installments of their novels I would eagerly await. In high school, when my teachers would ask us to write personal essays for our theme book writing, for example, the teacher would ask you to write your unforgettable Christmas vacation or unforgettable summer vacation, I would try to imitate the way the narratives and the dialogues of those comic stories were written. I would put drama. I would relive the dialogues in the comics so I could get good grades. But my teachers in grade school saw something special with the way I write my essays for the class. That was when I heard the teacher commented that Louis could write. Back then, I had no inkling that the Lord has blessed me with the gift of being able to write creatively. Then I discovered the stories of Lola Basyang or Grandma Basyang, written in Tagalog, which were serialized in a weekly magazine. Grandma is the English word for Lola. No? Grandma Basyang became a national symbol of stories and storytelling in the Philippines. Mr. Ramon Rocha and Miss Ina Reyes know her too. So Grandma Basyang is depicted as an old woman seated in a rocking chair with a big book of stories at hand, surrounded by kids. And soon I found out that the person behind the byline Grandma Basyang was actually a he, not a she. He was Severino Reyes, a playwright who edited the leading Tagalog weekly magazine in the pre-war Philippines, and he's sort of our Philippine version of Hans Christian Andersen. In his lifetime, he was able to write and publish around 400 stories. I was in grade 6 when my parents bought a complete set of Disney's Wonderful World of Knowledge, an encyclopedia that could attract one to devour its pages because it has overflowing illustrations featuring the Disney characters we also love, like Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, Goofy, Pluto, Louie, Huey, and Dewey, and the like. Plus the fact that the informational text had been rendered simply. I would refer to these books as Disneyfied encyclopedia. This has led me to read and discover a classic novel, The Little Prince, penned by French writer and poet Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. In high school, a cousin introduced me to the Reader's Digest magazine, and I became an avid reader of this magazine that I would eagerly await for its every issue. I would even ask the bookstore seller in the city to reserve a copy for me every month. And after going through the pages of a particular issue, I'd look for the vocabulary section towards the end of the Reader's Digest magazine and would test my ability to decipher the words mentioned there. I also took interest in the board game Scrabble and would prefer to play it over chess and Monopoly. And my parents would always ask us and my siblings to use a specific word in a sentence when we're attempting to form a word. I remember that you could not place a word in the board without knowing its meaning. When I entered the medical school, I became the editor of our school publication. So apart from doing editorials, I would write fiction and poetry for the literary page. I also made it a point to do some literary reading when medical textbooks overwhelmed me. I would have a book of poetry or novels or personal essays on the side. I remember reading a collection of short stories by a Filipino doctor, Dr. Arturo Rotor, while in the medical school. It's entitled The Men Who Play God, which had left an impression with me, for these are stories about practicing doctors. It was during that time that I came to know that there had been doctor authors in history. Anton Chekhov is a playwright, William Somerset Maugham, a fictionist, William Carlos Williams, a poet, and Michael Crichton, a novelist. Of course, I'd like to highlight a Filipino doctor author who paved the way for Philippine independence from the Spanish tyranny through his novels Noli Me Tangere, or Touch Me Not, and El Filibusterismo, or The Filibuster, Dr. Jose Rizal, our national hero, who was an ophthalmologist. The Philippines had been colonized by Spain for 300 years. So while a medical student, I would submit articles to various national publications, and I would get a high when a magazine or a newspaper of national circulation decides to publish my piece. I could say that writing for national magazines helped me get through the hardships of studying medicine. And it was also during this time that I came to know the Lord Jesus Christ through the medical ministry of Campus Crusade for Christ. And with the newfound faith, I came to read the Bible, enjoy the parables of Jesus and some of the wonderful stories in the Bible, as well as the books penned by theologian authors C.S. Lewis, John Stott, Philip Yancey, and our very own Melba Magay. From the Bible, I enjoyed reading the Book of Psalms because of the way these passages had been written, very literary as these were poetic, and the psalmist articulates what I feel about when I'm most fearful, stressed, and troubled. Eventually, I became a part of the Christian Writers Fellowship, where I had a chance to meet various professionals who loved to write and read, and had my early works critiqued by fellow writers and OMF editors. And I was already settled with writing magazine articles when I was challenged by a book editor at OMF to try my hand at writing books. A book is something permanent, an editor said. It can outlive the author. He cited the Danish author Hans Christian Andersen, the father of modern fairy tales, to prove her point. So it dawned on me that yes, I'd like to write and publish books too. Since then, I have written a handful of stories for children in the Philippines. Who would have thought that a medical practitioner like me, who has no writing-related degree from a university, would write and publish books? My reading habit in my younger days could have contributed to this. You see, there's really a connection between reading and writing. And to be a writer is to be a reader. My being a medical doctor has contributed a lot to my passion in writing stories. Armed with medical education, I tried to integrate some medical or health-related concepts with stories. So it's, I think, my formula, no? Integrating medical concepts with storytelling or with stories. It gave rise to a brand of literature that I would call stories with medical flavor. My popular children's book series, Mga Kwento ni Tito Doc, or The Stories of Uncle Doc, talks about health and hygiene in a fun, entertaining way. Had it not for my medical education, I would not have explored and discussed these topics with confidence. I owe it to my medical education that I am able to translate complex medical topics into simple ones. And in trying to present these concepts to my young, impressionable readers, I tried to magnify the world of the microorganisms and dramatize it and make analogies as necessary. So in a time of COVID-19 pandemic, my health-related book somehow contributed to the health literacy of our people. There was a renewed interest in some of my titles as there had been a string of storytelling events featuring my books. Parents and teachers would send me messages in my FB Messenger telling me how my books helped them articulate the hygiene concepts for their children and learners. And I'd like to especially mention my book, There's a War in Mark's Body, the one you see here, which talks about vaccination. Vaccination is a very hot topic nowadays. It answers the question on how a vaccine confers immunity, like what a vaccine is made of. And I had written it more than 2 decades ago, but it still remains relevant given the current predicament. I also had an opportunity to host a weekly storytelling program on air through the DZAS station of the Far East Broadcasting Company, again, to encourage people to read books. It was an effort by our organization, the Philippine Board on Books for Young People, to develop a culture of reading among Filipino families. As the host of the program, I got to interview the creative process of the authors, what went into the writing of the story, what inspired them to write the book, how their readings influenced them, and so on and so forth. Then an animated storytelling performed by a seasoned storyteller would follow through. And I would end the program by giving reading tips to our listeners. Years ago, there was even an attempt by a reading advocacy group, the Saaklat Sisikat Foundation, to promote the capital city of Manila as a city of reading people. Several initiatives had been undertaken to accomplish this, one of which was to partner with the Philippine Society of Ophthalmologists for eye checkup, because really, how can one read if the eyesight is impaired or if there's uncorrected nearsightedness? I was asked by this advocacy group as a form of support to write a comic book containing stories that dealt with error of refraction, especially nearsightedness, and vitamin A deficiency. It was a good program, but it didn't take off because there was a lack of support from the local government, whose priority was anything but reading. Last year, when the world was a bit kinder, when there was still Manila International Book Fair being held, I noticed that a lot of people lined up to enter the big convention center filled with books. There was a long queue of people. So Ina Reyes can attest to that. The security guards even stopped the people from entering the premises because they could no longer accommodate the people. It was a welcome development in the literary life, or should I say, intellectual life of our nation. True, Filipinos are not yet a reading people, but I hope that we'll get there soon. A few years ago, I had the privilege of being invited to attend the Sharjah Children's Reading Festival in the United Arab Emirates. And this Arab country puts an emphasis on the reading habit of its people. No? So it so happened that the ruler of this emirate, this sheikh, is a book author himself. So you see, if the leader of a particular nation is a reader, there will be programs directed at reading. It will be prioritized over expenditures on armaments and other stuff. When I was there to join the reading festival, I was sent to 5 different schools, 2 Filipino schools, 2 Indian schools, and 1 Arab school, to meet the school children to do an author talk and to invite them to the big expo center where there were ongoing activities all related to reading. What a way to entice the children to get hooked in the habit of reading. And also teachers in the public schools now are putting a premium on reading. There were reading-related initiatives such as DEAR. This is an acronym DEAR, which means drop everything and read. There is a certain time in the day when students would drop everything that they're doing to give way to reading. And there are also storytelling competitions, read aloud competitions, spoken poetry competitions. But the parents, teachers, and librarians should also make time to read. Remember that a teacher who reads breeds students who read. And parents, on the other hand, would love to see their kids to be readers, but they themselves don't read. No? So I believe that we should start developing a reading program directed also at parents and teachers. One of the schools I visited in Dubai, UAE, has an engaging reading program among the parents of their students. The parents have to read the book that their child is reading, because really, how could the parents know that the child has read the book if they themselves didn't get to read the book? And there's a simple quiz administered by a reading coordinator to the parents. As an author, I consider it a responsibility to help develop or redevelop a culture of reading by making my stories appealing to these children. I have to do my part in making, in raising a nation of readers. True, we read for leisure and fun, and reading should be fun. It should be a fun activity. But we also read for information, for knowledge, for details. We read to analyze, to develop a critical thinking, and to be wiser in decision making. We read for personal development. We read for professional development. We read for nation building. Everything that we do, even the habit of reading, should be anchored to nation building. So developing a reading culture should be viewed as an effective tool for nation building. And by nation building, I mean people building. We can only build ourselves and those in our circle of influence by developing a reading culture. We must make time in our daily lives, no matter how busy we are, to ensure that we develop and sustain a reading culture. For how can one help build a nation if its citizens do not make time to read? Reading is an activity that is born out of an attitude of the heart that is willing to learn. And if we have that kind of attitude, there's no way for us to go but grow in reading. Somebody said that one lifetime should be devoted to reading alone. What with the many books being published globally, no? So we really need one lifetime to read those books. And I couldn't agree more. William Somerset Maugham, a physician and a fictionist, once said, and I quote, that to acquire the habit of reading is to construct for yourself a refuge from almost all the miseries of life, end of quote. His words remain true today. With the current onslaught of COVID-19 pandemic, books offer a refuge, a place where we can go to soothe our minds and help us calm down. Reading saves us from the boredom and the loneliness of lockdown and quarantine. Come to think of it, we could easily travel to another land and time without a need for swab test and the vaccine and the required quarantine period if we're reading. So I urge everyone to keep on reading and learning and discovering. The world is for you for shaping. Thank you for your kind attention at magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. That's good evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Tito Doc. That's amazing, wonderful sharing. And I realized that both our panelists today, even though very accomplished writers of books, started out as readers. And I think in the sharing from both of them today, we realized that no one becomes an author without being an avid reader. And that's a wonderful, wonderful lesson for us to remember. I also kind of like what you shared, Tito Doc, about how you integrated knowledge from your chosen profession as a doctor, a medical doctor, into your the storybooks that you've written for children. And that's really fascinating because it kind of tells me that these books that are written could only have been written by you and nobody else. Isn't it wonderful when we have the ability to share what the Lord has uniquely gifted us with or passionate about. Yeah, it makes our work unique and powerful. So thank you both for that. You know, as you were sharing, Tito Dot, I realized I had a little joke which I had sort of put on a slide to share with everybody, and I think it's quite relevant because it is a medical joke. It's a medical joke. Let me just show it. Let me just show it to you guys. You know, hope you like it. Here you go.
You look so much thinner. Thanks. I had my appendix removed. Yeah, that's funny.
Okay. Yeah.
And then, you know, that's a medical joke for sure.
And by the way, Aaron, I also had a book on appendicitis. It's a children's book.
You did. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Yeah.
Fantastic.
That's amazing. Okay. We're gonna move now into a time of audience interaction. We have about maybe 15-20 minutes more, and so I just thought, you know, we could share some of the comments or questions that you have to our panelists, and we can interact on that. I reckon, well, we'll start maybe with the first one that we actually saw during the presentation. Let me just stop the sharing here. Okay, and that's from Jeremy, who basically asked this question. In a world where many people are writing more for glory or self-gratification rather than imparting knowledge, what is your advice to readers? Hankuri, what do you think?
Well, I think, you know, Paul said that some preach for their belly, some preach for their interest, but whatever they do, at least Christ is preached. Yes, it's true. People write for different purposes, but developing that culture will also be able to help you discover what good books are. And on my journey, I had to get to a point of making a decision, not to just read all kinds of books, but to read books that are biblical, books that are also relevant to my field and what I'm doing. So through experience, I have these lenses that I'm able to sift which book is good, which one is not good. For me, if it's not a professional book, once it's not biblical, or the principles there doesn't connect with scripture, I hardly can read them. And I will even promote them. But that should not stop you. There are, of course, people who have written because of their interest, but are there information there that you can learn? Are there things you can pick from there? Don't throw it away. Pick some truth from there. And I believe that will be of great help. Thank you.
Wonderful sharing. Tito Doc.
Well, people write for different reasons, but I guess most of the writers I know, they write because they have something to tell. They have something important to share. And I think that's when you write for the people and when you write with a good intention, I think that's also glorifying the Lord. Yes.
Yes. Amen. I really like what you both have said. There's only one lifetime for each one of us, and there are so many books to read, and some are better than others. You know, and I would really suggest that we really, each of us needs to make a list of books and then go after them with regularity, because time is running out, if you know what I mean. So yeah, and it's good to be discerning, of course, and wise. There are books that are just really not edifying or not helpful at all. And then, of course, there are books that we read for entertainment and pleasure, and that's something that we should not ignore. I think, as you said, Hankuri, yeah, because one of the things about reading is that it can be a very pleasurable thing, you know, having our minds open and developing empathy for the human condition. That's a wonderful byproduct of reading. So yeah, thanks for your advice on that. I think Sean wrote a question, but it really is probably a kind of a, he's basically saying that Sean is from Bangladesh, and he asks if you, Tito Doc, would connect with him after the webinar, because I think he wants to also bring your books there. Hopefully.
Okay.
Praise the Lord. That sounds wonderful. Yes. Paul has a wonderful, welcome Paul. You have a wonderful question, and he said, I've heard that until modern times, nearly all reading was performed aloud and not silently. What thoughts do you have about the benefits of reading books out loud versus reading silently? Good question.
Well, I think reading book loud is able to help you not only to see, but you're also able to hear. So you engage more than one of your senses, which have its advantages. So depending on the environment, but reading loud really do have a benefit if you're not going to be distracting another person. So I see that's something that can be done well. There are times I just read loud, especially if I'm feeling drowsy and I don't want to sleep. So I have to, employ means to just help me read. And that goes a long way, yeah. Of course, with audiobooks now too, you are reading it, you are listening to it, you're also seeing there are applications that you are seeing it, you are listening to it, so that helps you be able to engage more than one senses. Maybe the doctor can talk more.
I agree with Hankuri. No? Reading aloud has its benefits, but we also encourage silent reading, no? Because sometimes people withdraw from reading because of displeasurable experiences we get from reading. Like people, we get used to being graded in school. No, in school, we get used to being graded when we read, and so we shouldn't treat the act of reading as a performance, because somehow reading aloud is like a performance. It's but it allows you to listen to yourself and to articulate your thoughts. I guess reading aloud and reading silently should be encouraged. No, it should be part of our reading disciplines.
Right.
Yeah, maybe Lee is to add that is for people to understand really how best do you assimilate, how best do you get the information in. So if reading loud is what will help you get the best from a book, go ahead. If reading silently that will help you, go ahead and do that.
This is a related question, I think, to also how some people learn. My wife, Namiko, and she probably won't mind me sharing this story. She has a law degree. We met when we were in law school. She's very accomplished. She's got advanced degrees in education and so on. But she only found out quite late in life that she does better with reading books out loud. Her retention is better, her memory, her understanding is better than if she were to kind of cast her eyes on the page and then keep turning the pages. When we were courting, and I love books, and I used to give her books regularly, and she would say thank you, and then much later on I realized she put them on the shelf and she never read any of them. And then she told me actually later on that she thinks that her brain is not wired to be able to read a book on the page. She starts to feel sleepy and so on and so forth. But when she discovered audiobooks, she just became a super avid reader. Everything that went in was just so memorable. And after she reads a book that way, she would come and tell me all about it, from memory. It was really, really amazing. So yeah, I think it activates different parts of our brain, I suppose. So we should not sort of confine our thinking that audiobooks are actually not good. It could be that some people just take to audiobooks better, or even reading it out loud. So it kind of goes, you process it through your eyes, and then you read it out loud again, and you process it again. That's also a wonderful way to read. Yeah. We've got a question that was emailed in a day or so ago from Eric from South Africa, and he asked a question: for those people who did not grow up with the love of reading, how can we now try to help them to develop that love for reading? Any thoughts?
Well, it's not yet too late to start the habit of reading. Actually, Mr. Eric Binion of South Africa can maybe he can set a goal. Maybe he can commit to read. He can have a goal by having, for example, a goal of reading, for example, 12 books a year. And then you divide that big goal into smaller goals by reading at least one book per month. Because when you set goals and you are out to accomplish the goal, it will help you, And you can also have you can also set a time, maybe set a number of pages to read every day. Like because we're busy, we can have 10 to 20 pages of reading materials per day. And we should, commit to really read every day, the 10 to 20 pages that I've mentioned. And we shouldn't get sidetracked by TV watching and internet browsing, etc., until you develop the habit of reading. Or sometimes you can exercise your reading muscles by spending maybe 10 to 15 minutes of your day reading. And then maybe after a week, you can increase your reading time by 5 minutes. So the following week, you have a 15-minute reading time. And then the third week, you have a 20-minute reading time, and so on and so forth. And so, and also, he can have, he can try having a reading list. He can ask a list of good books from friends, from people he admires, and he can try to get help to get hold of the books and read. I think it's important for somebody to set a goal and commit to the goal.
Yeah, I think thank you, Louis, for that. What I can share is that I've discovered that love is contagious. So you would like to develop a habit for reading, that you don't have, get people who already love reading. And I've had a lot of people, young people, and even older ones who have come to work with me, who had no interest in reading. But as we stayed together with them for weeks in the office, or working together, meeting together, interacting together, I discovered that most of them become avid readers. In fact, for me, it's always been a double thing, because I read and write. So I also introduced them to the issue of reading and writing. So I've seen most of them, I can mention several, I can identify most of them who came, not only start reading, but also start writing. And I have some of them who have written their own books and also published their work. So staying within a community of readers will always influence you to read, in addition to what Louis has shared. So if you see somebody who loves book, get attached to that person, and you will develop a habit of reading. That's what I can say. Yeah, thank you.
These are wonderful tips and hints. Yes, Louis.
He can also find a reading buddy, somebody who will read with you, and whom you will be accountable to. So a reading partner or a buddy reader. Have a buddy reader, a reading buddy.
Yeah.
Or join a book club. Join a book club.
Yeah. Hankuri, I know, has a book club that meets online. And just before the webinar, we were chatting a little bit, and I realized that both of you really speak about, and you model visible love for reading and books, and you sort of you don't want it to be a solo activity. So the people that you mentor and you journey with, you give them good books to read, you read it with them, you ask them about books that they read, and in that way you sort of hold each other accountable, and your passion for books and what you read is just so contagious. So that's a really great way, and I think it just means that we have to model it for people, parents and educators, youth workers, pastors, everyone. We have to be modeling it for sure. Yeah, there were some really good ideas also from attendees. Someone was just sharing there that the best way to encourage non-readers is to give them a really engaging book, one that will be hard to put down. So it's hard to put down because it's a powerful story, it's a great plot. Give them a good fiction, which sort of engages them and makes them feel they can identify with the protagonist. That's a really great way to give them an engaging book. You start with a book of fiction and not necessarily with a book of non-fiction. That's a great tip. Another of our attendees says that how-to books, a lot of people love to read how-to books. I think life is hard. Many people have a lot of problems and they want solutions, and there are plenty of people who write books that try to help. So that's a whole genre of books that you see in the bookstores for sure. They're helpful. Yeah, that's great. That's great.
The how-to books are very helpful, the self-help books. When I was starting as a writer, I would read self-help books like how to write a story, how to write a poem, how to write a novel.
Yes.
And it helped me a lot.
Wonderful. We've got two people in attendees who've asked you specifically, Hankuri and Louis, what are you reading now for enrichment? Maybe you can mention one, and maybe, is there a book that you think everybody should read? And I suppose we'll all say the Bible, but maybe we'll just leave the Bible aside for the time being, and we'll talk a little bit about it later. But do you have just share with us one book that you're reading right now, and what book do you think everyone should read?
Well, I have this book, Crossover. This is written by Kwame Alexander from the USA. This book won the Newbery Medal, and it talks about the love for basketball among brothers. And it's a very good book. It's the novel is rendered in verse, so it's not the prose type of novel, no, but it's rendered in verses. So this is a very nice book, a crossover by Kwame Alexander. And in the Philippines, we have this new book, Sally's Crocodile. This is a non-fiction children's storybook about the life of Araceli Limcaco-Dans, one of our prominent visual artists in the country. And this is sort of a biography, but a biography in a storybook format, written by her granddaughter, Gabi Lee. No? This is a very nice read, no? This Sally's Crocodile.
Yeah, books I'm reading now. There's a book on strategic planning. Yes, in respect to my work, I'm presently going through this book because I'm training and then leading a team on strategic planning. And then I have this book on history makers. It's a book that deals with the issue of worldview and how we can make a difference in the world today by Cindy Trim. I find it very helpful, and I think I'm engaged with it at the moment. One of the books I'm reading. And as a missionary, I'm also presently reading this book, People Raising, by William P. Gilland, on support raising in ministry, and the Overcoming Life Through Prayer. This is a book I've been promoting in recent times. So I also engaged in reading it, giving it out. It's used in small group by Anita Johnson, and very, very good and biblical on the subject of prayer, overcoming life through prayer. So these are current books I'm personally reading. That's one thing with me. I read, sometimes more than a book at once. So I have one I read in the morning, one in the daytime, and one I just read it for leisure. So these are a few books. And then what book can someone read in lifetime? I think there is one, if I'm to recommend just one book, Knowing God by J.I. Packer. I find that book very, very helpful and very, very encompassing, especially for Christians. That's a book I would like to recommend for everyone. Thank you.
And I'm also, in addition to the books that I've mentioned, Aaron, I'm also reading The Korean Mind, Understanding Contemporary Korean Culture, because in our household, my mom, my sisters, my nephews and nieces, they would usually watch K-dramas, Korean dramas in Netflix. And when I saw this book in a bookstore, I got hold of it and tried to understand the Korean mind. So this is a very nice book on understanding the contemporary Korean culture.
Super. I'm gonna try to borrow that book from you at some point after you finish, because that's a fascinating topic. I recently, a while back, spent some time as a writer in residence at the Toji Cultural Center in Korea. I met a bunch of Korean artists and writers, and it was a very profitable time and very engaging. Mm-hmm. But I left with many questions about Korean culture and their psyche and their thinking. So that topic fascinates me no end. Yes, Hankuri, I echo with what you shared about J.I. Packer's Knowing God. I recently, just in August, read it again for the second time. I realized that the 20 years that have passed between the first time I read it and this year made me really feel that it was almost a different book. I got so much different things and insights out of it this time around. So it's kind of interesting that books kind of grow with you, or rather, as you grow, you bring yourself to the book again, or you bring the book to yourself, and you kind of get different things. And that's the great thing about a great book, that you sort of, it bears reading more than once. What's your experience with that, by the way, both of you? Reading a book a second time or third time with having some years pass by? Want to think about that a little bit? We'll come back to that.
Well, there was a book by Dr. Melba Magay. It's entitled A Faith for the Emptiness of Our Time. I read it when I was, a new Christian. And then after several decades, I reread it again. And it unfolded new layers of meaning when I tried to read it again. So I think every now and then we find books that, we make time to really devour its pages and read again, and we see another insight, no, when we reread the same book.
Yeah, thank you for that. We have maybe about 5 minutes left to go, so maybe we'll just kind of come back to this thing about this question I had, or this talking point about the Bible. And I think both of you in your sharing disclosed that you each came to the Bible at a different point in time in your life. Hankuri, you grew up, you're the son of missionary parents. The Bible was familiar to you since you were young, so it kind of formed your life very, very early. And then for Tito Doc, you came to Christ a little bit later, after you had already begun, and then you began to approach the Bible with great interest and to read it for all it's worth. So do you have a particular book of the Bible that is very special to you, very personal to you? Hankuri, you want to go first?
Yeah, I think for me, can I really say I have one that is so special to me? Maybe I can say the Gospels. I find the Gospels interesting. I think almost every year I go through the Gospels.
Mhm.
And it's for one reason, I just try to study Jesus Christ. For instance, this year, I took time to study the Gospels, just trying to study Jesus as a human being. You know, how was he? How did he live? There are times I study the Gospel to just, see how Jesus Christ solved problems in the world, how he faced challenges, and then sometimes divinity. So the Gospels, I seem to find myself around them most of the times.
I think for me, it's the Book of Psalms. The
Yeah,
Book of
the
Psalms.
poet.
It's really poetic, and it captures my interest, and it speaks of my it articulates my oh, my thoughts about this current pandemic. So I do a lot of reading in the Book of Psalms during the pandemic.
That's wonderful. Yeah, the Psalms still contain the meditations of the psalmist or several psalmists, that are just full of human anguish and suffering and lament and joys and tribulation, the whole. Yeah, so, just saying the lament Psalms, yeah, the world is in a season of really great uncertainty, and lament is, I think, an appropriate response from all of us. Yeah, and it's really also, in a way, a God-appointed time. We're coming to the end of the year, and Christmas. So I think our celebrations this year all around the world take on a slightly different feel. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to wrap up, and I'm going to show a slide, just to kind of maybe have some take-home points for us from your sharing. Here it is. I hope you can all see it. Yeah, we talked a little bit about, what reading good books does for us at different stages of our lives. It teaches us about human nature and about life. It helps develop empathy. There's a writer who said that reading a book is a way of slipping helplessly into someone else's life, into their experience, into their emotions. Yeah, that's really very, very important for us as fellow human beings, even as people in ministry as well, developing empathy and understanding of one another. Tito Dong, you mentioned about reading as something that develops culture and a national identity. I couldn't agree more. That's a wonderful thing for us to do as culture stewards. And of course, reading as learning. It educates our ignorance away, and it hopefully puts some wisdom into our lives that we can apply in our everyday lives. It reduces stress and anxiety. It also conversely motivates and inspires. It stimulates creativity. You can see from our panelists today and also many others that as avid readers, and then at some point they have things that they want to share, and they just have to write a book in order to kind of express what they've learned about the world and about God and about themselves. Reading also improves our communication skills. This is such an important thing for anyone who wants to have any sort of influence in the world, at your work, professionally, or as a family, and your close relationships. Strengthens our writing abilities as well. These are, I think, some. It's not a all inclusive list, but these are some of the things that we have sort of been reminded about today. So I think that's just so wonderful. So I think time has now come for us to bring an end to this very enjoyable webinar. I just want to thank our two panelists. Please give them a virtual round of applause. And existing one, thank you so much, Hankuri. Thank you, Louis, for being here with us, sharing, so inspiring. And thank you all for joining us virtually online today. And until we meet again, from all of us, thank you. God bless you. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And don't forget to give a gift of a book.
There you go, Hankuri. Yes.
Yes.
That's right. Buy a book and give one for Christmas. Okay, everyone?
So instead of exchange gift, go for exchange books.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to be doing that. So everyone too. Okay.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. God bless you, everyone.
God bless you, Aaron.
It is great
Thank
connecting.
you.
God bless you, Bernice and Ramon.
Thank
And
you.
Hankuri. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thanks for having us. Good night.
Thank you.